Hey, I hope you're doing good. I was supposed to present in CiscoLive Las Vegas this year again, but well, you know what happened. So we are recording at home this time, and the result will land in CiscoLive website. I wanted to give you a premiere view of the session, which will be published in mid-July 2020. It's probably more than 2 hours, and I don't expect anyone, at least any normal person, to be able to watch that, so I split it into multiple parts, and they will be published day by day. I hope you will enjoy it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to present this digital breakout session dedicated to the NCS 5500 platforms. My name is Nicolas Février, and I'm a TME in the MIG organization. That's the former Service Provider Business Unit. During my 16 years in Cisco, I worked with CRS, ASR 9000, XRV 9000, and I started working on the NCS 5500 4 years ago, just before the official launch. If you want to reach me, easiest way will probably be with Twitter. I'm managing the @CiscoIOSXR handle, and I'm usually quite responsive on this one. If you want to find much more details on the NCS 5500, IOSXR, and the 8000 series, you can take a look at my YouTube channel here. I presented 25 times at CiscoLive in Europe, US, and Australia during the last 6 years. It will be the 10th edition, digital only this time, on NCS 5500. That's actually a great opportunity to share some of the secrets of this platform without the usual time constraints. But it's a tricky exercise because we need to satisfy the curiosity and expectations of very different kinds of attendees. Those who are discovering the platform for the first time, those who are familiar with the product but not aware of the latest additions, and those who are already operating these routers on a daily basis and expect a much deeper level of details on the internal mechanisms of the platform. This digital edition of CiscoLive is giving me a great opportunity to satisfy all these expectations. Well, at least I hope so. To present the NCS 5500, we'll start with a quick tour in the lab. It will be more entertaining than a tedious description of each box one by one. Then, I will answer very common questions asked by customers like what kind of MPU is powering this router, what the bandwidth I can actually use, do you have an external TCAM or not, and therefore what's the routing scale we can reach, and will it support a full V4 and V6 internet view? Also, I will answer common questions regarding the interfaces, like which products should I pick if I need 400 gig Ethernet interfaces, or on the other extreme, 1 gig, or even fast Ethernet interfaces. We will also answer questions related to the features. What are my options if I need to configure BGP flow spec, or timing like SYNC or PTP, or MACsec encryption? Finally, I will compare the form factor and dimensions of these products, since not all of them are suitable for cell-site cabinets, for example. You got the idea. I just want to browse the portfolio with these different perspectives and guide the newcomers in their product selection. We will introduce the NCS 5700 and the new line cards based on Jericho 2 to go deeper in the internals of the product. We will start presenting the different NPUs, and then we will describe the ingress buffering architecture, including the concept of VOQ and FMQ for multicast. We will explain why we are not scheduling multicast and what is the impact on QoS. And we will describe the life of the packet, both for unicast and multicast. Finally, an important section of this presentation is dedicated to the key points you need to pay attention to before introducing NCS 5500 in your network. In the mass scale infrastructure group, the vast majority of the products are running IOSXR. The only exception to this rule is NCS 520. So, IOSXR is a common ground for all our routers. That means they are configured and managed in a very similar way. But we can sort the products in different categories based on the forwarding plane. On the right, the active components involved in the packets forwarding are based on Cisco recommendation or directly owned by Cisco. We talk about proprietary or custom ASICs. For example, NPower ASICs in CRS or Lightspeed ASICs in the ASR 9K are proprietary elements. In older 9K generations, ASICs like Trident, Typhoon, and Tomahawk were customized for Cisco even if they were provided by another company, EasyChip for instance. Same for the latest platform we introduced. The 8000 series is based on Silicon One made by Cisco. On the left, the virtual plane is handled by a virtual component. It's a Linux container inside a virtual machine executed on x86 infrastructure. This universal virtual forwarder in XRV 9000 has been created by Cisco. In the center, we have a third category of forwarding plane based on merchant silicon. The ASICs in NCS 500, 5000 and 5500 are all produced by Broadcom. That means off-the-shelf components that everyone can purchase. At the end of the day, what really makes the richness of our solutions is iOS XR. If someone talks about NCS without more precision, the first thing to ask is which one? Indeed, we have many different products under the Network Convergence System umbrella. This chart will help you understand the different potential positions in the network for these products. Today, we are talking about the NCS 5500, which is used by our customers for core, peering, aggregation, and even light edge roles. NCS 5500 should not be confused with NCS 5000. Even if the product IDs are very similar and they are both based on Broadcom ASICs, they are actually made of different parts from Broadcom. The NCS 5000 uses XGS NPUs, which are optimized for high bandwidth, low scale, no deep buffers, that means minimal QoS capabilities, and they are not used in chassis. You will find them as standalone top-of-rack routers or satellite of ASR 9K and NCS 6K. We can say they are cost-optimized. On the other hand, the NCS 5500 is powered by the DNX ASIC series, that's the Qumran, Jericho, just to name a few of them. They are used in fixed systems, centralized, but also in chassis. They can do more both in terms of buffering, feature complexity and scale. If you want to compare the NCS 5500 with other products in the portfolio, the closest will be the NCS 500 series, like 540 or 560. They are based also on DNX ASICs, and in many ways they are very similar. To summarize the comparison, NCS 5000 on the top left uses XGS ASICs like Trident and Tomahawk. NCS 540 and 560 on the bottom are based on DNX ASICs, respectively Qumran AX and MX. And finally, the topic of this session, the NCS 5500 is powered by DNX ASICs also, like Qumran MX, Jericho, Jericho Plus, and Jericho 2. Make sure you don't mention 500 or 5000 if you want to describe 5500. It may confuse the persons you are talking to. But what is merchant exactly? In these routers, the internal active elements are provided by third-party vendors. Everyone, including you, can buy them. These vendors are providing SDK, and it will be your job to find or to create the software to operate it. But it's not really new. Even in our proprietary or custom routers, we always used parts from different third-party vendors. Retimers, CPU, memory, NPUs, internal switches, all these elements coming from Innovium, Broadcom, Marvell, Intel, Xilinx, etc. The NCS 5500 was the first in that sense. It was entirely composed of merchant components. But does it mean we are now going all in with merchant silicon? Absolutely not. And it's easy to prove it with the announcement we made last year on Silicon One ASICs and the first platforms to use it, the 8000 series. Cisco has the luxury to invest in both merchant silicon with the NCS 5500, and we have a long roadmap of new products coming, and at the same time in custom silicons with the 8000 series. If you want more details on the 8000, search the breakout session BRK SPG 2003, presented by Lane Wigley, and you won't regret it. Now the NCS 5500 portfolio. At the moment of this recording, we are shipping 14 different fixed routers, 3 modular chassis of 4, 8, and 16 slots, and we can mix and match 11 different line cards in it. It's actually very impressive to see how many variations of the product we have been able to produce in just 4 years. The difference between each fixed chassis or each line card is essentially driven by customer use cases. So we know it matches specific sweet spots on the market. It's one of the key benefits of the merchant silicon approach. Time to market is significantly shorter. Some of the products or line cards are called base or scale. In the base system, you will only use the memories inside the NPU to store routes, access list information, QoS classifiers, counters, statistics. In the scale system, you will increase the routing or access list scalability using an external TCAM. It's a memory we have on the side of the chipset, and the capacity of this additional memory will depend on the type of ASIC. These ETCAM are optional, but not field replaceable. The scale systems and line cards are identified with a -SC you can see at the end of the product ID. If you are familiar with the SR9K, you could tell me, okay, I know about that. That's the same thing than TR and SC. And yes, in many ways it's true. On the NCS 5500 SC system, you will be able to do more things and reach higher scale that are not possible on base versions. Some features like BGP flow spec, hybrid access list, QPPB are only available on scale versions. What is different from 9K is the QS capabilities. On SR9K, you will have more queues on the SC cards than the TR cards. It's not the case for NCS 5500, where QS scale and features are the same on base or scale. Some key concepts on NPU. You certainly noticed I'm using the terms NPU, forwarding ASICs, chipsets equally. It will probably be a shock for the true purist, but in the context of this presentation, it's the same thing. Please forgive this approximation. I'm describing here the hardware element responsible for the packet forwarding, the scheduling, and offering connections to network interfaces on one side and fabric on the other side. Simplification is key. During the last 20 years, you may have noticed that we collapsed and integrated more and more elements generation after generation. In the CRS1, we used to have one component to connect the network interface, two for ingress and egress packet lookup and buffering, one for egress queuing, two for ingress and egress fabric connection. 15 years later, we have just one single chipset to perform all these tasks. Less components means less interconnection, lower power dissipation, faster speed, and cost optimization. The DNX family we have in NCS 5500 can be used in different ways. The first type is called standalone. That means all the ports are directly connected to a single NPU. No fabric port needed. Some people call it SoC for system on a chip or switch on a chip, and even ROC for router on a chip. That's the same thing. The second category is when you create a CLO architecture with leaf and spine inside the router. For example, you have 3 or more NPUs interconnected through 1 or more fabric engines. If a packet is received on one NPU and needs to be transmitted to a port assigned to another NPU, the packets will be split in cells, routed to the destination through the fabric ASIC, like this. If you just need 2 NPUs in your system, we have a third option called back-to-back. In that case, the fabric links are used to connect the 2 NPUs directly, and it saves us 1 fabric element. Today we use this model in just 2 routers and soon a third one. And there is actually a fourth architecture described by Broadcom, which is called mesh, but we don't use it in any of the NCS 5500 systems. Let me show you 2 big categories of ASIC architecture here. On the left, the run-to-completion, where we have a lot of packet processing elements, and each one of them handles 1 packet at a time, and it will keep it in the memory until all the treatment of the packet is done. That's the most flexible design, but the consequence is it may take more time to apply complex sets of functions. On the right, we have another model called pipeline. Each tick of the clock, 1 packet will be treated, regardless of the amount of features you apply. The pipeline is made of blocks and sub-blocks, and each one having 1 particular role: packet lookup, next stop resolution, packet filtering, VLAN translation, label and position. The benefit of such an architecture is its predictability, at least in terms of performance. And if a packet cannot be treated in 1 clock tick, it will be recycled. The NCS 5500 is based on this pipeline model. Logically, the packets are received on the ingress pipeline. I'm representing here the blocks and sub-blocks, but also the resources that each of the sub-block can access in read and write mode. By resource here, I mean the different databases, or memories, where we store information that can be used by the blocks. You'll notice that the egress pipeline, where the cells are received from the fabric, is made of a lower number of sub-blocks and a lower number of databases. But it's just an abstracted representation. I just want to illustrate that we have more capabilities on ingress than egress. Actually, many features that you will apply through configuration on an egress interface will be programmed on the ingress pipeline. The functional blocks will position specific information in the internal headers, and this information will be used by the egress pipeline to apply a specific task. I'm taking an example of two line cards here, where packets is received on the line card 1 and is exiting the router through line card 2. On this line card 2, you see that only the egress pipeline is used. Actually, if the packet is received on the same ASIC than its exit point, we don't need to pass the packet through the fabric. So it's different than CRS and ASR9K. We have an internal shortcut to connect ingress and egress pipelines. But still, the packets are split in cells and reassembled when they are received on the other side. DNX ASICs are made of 2 cores, but there is a couple of exceptions to that rule: Qumran X and Jericho 2C. All others are made of 2. That means the network ports allocation is spread between these 2 cores. Inside these pipelines, you see 2 main blocks named PP and TM. PP for packet processor, that's where you have all your features, packet lookup, access list, etc. The TM stands for traffic manager. It contains a scheduler, and that's where the QoS configuration is programmed. If you compare the NCS 5500 and 9K, the key difference is buffering. For instance, the DNX is using hybrid ingress buffering. We have an OCB, on-chip buffer, accessible by the ingress pipeline, 16 MB for Jericho and 32 for Jericho 2, but also a larger off-chip buffer that you can see on the left of this diagram. It could be 4 GB of graphical memory for Jericho or 8 GB of HBM for Jericho 2. And it's not an optional part. All the NPUs in the NCS 5500 series will have one. It cannot be added or removed. On the egress part, we have a much smaller buffer, made of twice 3 MB for Jericho. That will be used to differentiate unicast and multicast, high and low priority, before the packet serialization. So in case of congestion, the packets are not stored there, but actually on the large ingress off-chip buffer. It can be visualized on this picture. It's a Jericho Plus with a 4 GB of graphical GDDR5 memory here. You can see they are indeed physically outside of the NPU. It's not just a way to represent things. The second type of memories we are showing here are not used for packet, but for data, like routes, next stop, encapsulation, counters, access lists, etc. They are the resources I mentioned earlier, those accessed in read and write by the different subblocks of the pipeline. On Jericho and Jericho Plus, they have a fixed size. On Jericho 2, we have more flexibility, and I will talk about this later. On some systems, optionally, we can have an external TCAM. That's the scale routers. We are storing more routes and more classifiers in it. On Jericho 2, we can also store statistics. On this line card picture, you can also visualize it. On the top left, above the Jericho Plus, you can see the heatsink covering the external TCAM. Before showing you the routers in my lab, I will take 2 minutes to explain the logic behind the product naming. For the fixed platforms, NCS 55 represents systems powered by Qumran MX, Jericho, and Jericho Plus. NCS 57 will represent the system based on Jericho 2 variants. We have such products in the roadmap, but they are not shipping today. Then we have in blue 0, A, B, C, and D, and it clarifies what kind of ASIC is used internally. 0 for Jericho, A for Jericho Plus, B for Jericho 2, C for Jericho 2C, etc. The fourth number in red is showing the product size in terms of rack units. Then comes the description of the port density, like 36 by 100 gig, or MOD, to describe the modular system where we will use MPAs, modular port adapters. SC, in green, is used to indicate a scale system with external TCAM. And finally, S represents the systems with MACsec capability. For the line cards, it follows more or less the same logic. NC55 for Jericho and Jericho Plus, NC57 for Jericho 2. And then, in red, it's the port type and density, followed by optional SC and S. And now let's take a look at the routers I'm using in my lab in San Jose, California. We'll start with the smallest router of the portfolio, the NCS 5501. 1RU, based on Qumran MX and offering a mix of SFP and QSFP ports. It's a standalone platform, what we named SOC earlier. Whether it's a scale, -SC, or base system, you will have different port density. On the -SC version specifically, the purple line you see in the front indicates the high-power optic-capable ports. You know, ZR or DWDM. If you don't see any purple in the front, that means it's a base system. On this box, you have a higher port density, 48 times 10 gig instead of 40 ports, and 6 times 100 gig instead of 4, which makes it a slightly oversubscribed platform, at least from a bandwidth perspective. It does not support MACsec, and only the SC version can do timing. Let's introduce the NCS 5502 now, and this time it's a platform optimized for 100 gig Ethernet. We have 48 ports QSFP28 in just 2 rack units. It's powered by 8 Jericho ASICs, connected through 2 Fabric engines, 3600. No difference in terms of port density between SC and non-SC. No timing, no MACsec on these routers. We are showing here different QSFP28 optics, SR4, LR4, and even BiDi. The next router here is also optimized for 100 gig, but in a 1RU form factor. That's the NCS 55A136H. The letter A means it's powered by Jericho+. 4 of them actually, interconnected through a single FE3600. 36H, we have 36 ports QSFP that can be 100 gig each. We have an SC and non-SC version, and they support timing and MACsec on all ports. A smaller version, cost-optimized, also exists. It's called NCS 55A124H. Still 1 rack unit, powered by a pair of Jericho Plus in back-to-back mode, and with specific route memory size that's positioned it between SC and non-SC, supporting more than 2 million routes in a feed. We will explain this in more details in 10 minutes. It supports timing, but as you can see, there is no S at the end of the product ID, so it does not support MACsec. 2 ASICs, each servicing 12 ports 100 gig, so it's a bit oversubscribed, it consumes less power, occupies less space, in depth, and is cost-optimized. The next fixed systems I'm showing here is named NCS 55A2 Mode. It's by far our best-selling device, and I believe it's because of its flexibility and all the positions it can cover. A2, that means it's a 2RU box powered by a Jericho Plus ASIC. Mode means it's modular. Yeah, I know, it's a fixed modular chassis. On top of the 40 fixed SFP ports, 16 of them can be used at 25 gig Ethernet, we have 2 bays where we can insert 400 gig modular port adapters, and you can mix and match different types of these MPAs depending on your needs. We have 4 times 100 gig Ethernet Gray, or 2 ports CFP2 DWDM, 12 ports SFPs, and finally a combo module mixing 2 ports 100 gig Gray and 1 port CFP2 200 gig colored. That's what makes it so flexible. We have a hardened version supporting a wider temperature range. We also have a conformal coating version. It can be used in cell sites, for aggregation, and for small peering pops. We also have 2 fixed systems specifically addressing the 25 gig top-of-rack needs, and we introduced them last year, NCS 55A1, 24Q6HS, and 48Q6H. The letter Q here represents a quarter, you know, like a 25-cent coin. 1 rack unit, 24 ports SFP, but only half of them can be used at 25 gig on the first one, while all the ports can be SFP28 on the second. And they also have 6 ports QSFP for 100 gig. The yellow color in the front plate represents the support of 25 gig optics. One important difference also is the NPU type. Only 1 Jericho Plus for the 24Q and 2 Jericho Plus with large internal memories in the 48Q. Let's move on to the modular chassis. We have 4 slots, 7 rack units, 8 slot, and 16 slot chassis, and this last one is only 21 RU, so half of a rack. In the front, you have 2 route processors in active standby redundancy mode, and in the back you have 2 system controllers. Also, we have the fan trays, and each of the fan tray covers 2 fabric cards. Here you can see the fabric cards and the fan trays for 8 slot and 16 slot chassis. Important to note that we have 2 versions of them. It's mandatory to use the V2 if you want to use 400 gig LAN cards. We don't officially support the migration from V1 to V2 in service. It will require to power down the system to proceed to the replacement. The LAN cards now. 6 are based on Jericho, 3 on Jericho Plus, and 2 on Jericho 2s. The NC55 36x100 gig is the very first one we introduced, more than 3 years ago. As the name implies, 36 ports QSFP Plus or QSFP28 without external TCAM. 6 months later, we released an NC55 24x100 gig SC, still powered by Jericho ASIC, but with external TCAM this time. That's why we have only the space and cooling capacity for 24 ports 100 gig. Then we added the combo cards, NC55 18H 18F and 24H12F SC. Both are offering 36-port QSFP, but only a portion of them can be used at 100 gig, while the rest is 40. This line card is a bit special in the portfolio since all the ports presented before were QSFP. Here, in the NC55 6x200 gig DWDM, we are using CFP2 SCO. So, it's an IP over DWDM line card with long reach capability. Note, the CFP2 here are different from the ones we mentioned earlier in the MPA. On this line card, they are SCO. That means the DSP is present inside the line card and not on the optics. Then we launched the first line card with Jericho Plus, a new external TCAM, the NC55 36x100 ASC, that supports 4 million IPv4 routes in a FIB without compromise in terms of port density. And we have two mode line cards, a mix of 12 SFP and 2 QSFP plus ports, fixed, and 2 slots for MPAs of 400 gig, the same kinds we described earlier. They exist in both SC and unknown SC version. Okay, that's it for the lab tour. You can see we didn't make much effort in terms of wiring. Let's take different approaches to describe the NCS 5500 series and at the same time answer frequently asked questions from the customers.